Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with today. It should be fairly short, and then I will help you guys get started on your assignment if you haven't already. So we talked about reading and writing files last time, how to open files, how to read files, how to write files. Today is going to be a little bit about organizing those files and being able to manipulate different types of files. So a couple of new utilities, one of them being the shutil module, and you can import this one in. It's going to let you copy, move, rename files, delete files, etc. from within your programs. So to use it, you use import shutil. From there, you can use shutil.copy and you pass it the source of the file that you want to copy and the destination that you want to send it to. So it's basically using Python to do copy and paste that you guys are familiar with in a normal operating system, but you may want your program to do this for you. You can either send a string here on the source and destination, or you can send the path object that we learned about yesterday. So if you open the path module, you set up the path, that way it determines what operating system you're on. You can then pass that into this here as well. So an example of that would be something like import shutil in OS. You could also import from pathlib, import path. We go ahead and set up our home path by saying p equals path.home. And then from there, hopefully that makes it a little easier to see there. From there, we'll use shutil.copy in order to pass in the path. And then we'll go ahead and pass it to some other folder that we want to copy it to. And at that point, it's going to copy our spam.txt that's in our local folder out to some other folder inside of our user directory. Same thing works with shutil copy here. It's going to go ahead and pass out with a Windows path out. Okay. Another one that's available is copy tree. So before, copy will just copy a single file, right? If you want to copy an entire folder and every folder under it and file that's under it, you could use copy tree. You use it the same way, passing a source and destination, but it's going to copy all the files and all the folders that are in that source destination that you feed it. So if you want to copy everything, that's the best way to do it. There's a couple different ways of moving and renaming files. With shutil.move, we pass it a source and then a destination. That destination will point to some folder, and then that source file will get moved into that destination folder. So very similar to copy, you're going to pass it a destination here or a source, and then you're going to pass it a destination. Again, these are string files here. You can also use the path object if you want to. All right, you can also move them here, and if you want to rename that file, you could. So the difference between this one and this one down here is we just passed it the folder that we wanted it to go to. If we pass it the folder and a file name, that essentially allows us to move that file and also rename it. So it started out being called bacon.txt. Now it's called new bacon.txt. All right. If you happen to try to copy someplace that doesn't exist, the destination doesn't exist, you will get a traceback and a file not found error. Again, this is beneficial because you can use a try and accept clause in order to get some good feedback to the user that that folder doesn't exist. Would you like to create it? That kind of thing. Then you can run a small piece of code to create the folder, then rerun the code that would move that file in there. Anybody have any questions on copy, move, copy tree? Okay. This one, in terms of permanently deleting files and folders, we can use the OS module and we can use .unlink, which will delete a file at a given path. If we use rmdir, it will delete the folder at that path, but that folder must be empty of any files or folders underneath of it. If we use rmtree, then it will delete all files and folders under it, no matter what's inside of it. All right. The problem with using these three here is that when you remove it, it's gone. You know, in a normal operating system, when you delete something, where does it end up? Recycle bin, right? So if you remove it this way, it's just going to be deleted forever. So we have another option of using something that will actually send it to the recycle bin. So this example here is just going to show you to use that glob module that we talked about yesterday. That way you can do a search for anything that ends in .rxt or txt or whatever you want it to be, and you can delete those files.
I had a question real quick.
Yeah.
Is it our recycle bin, or would it be a recycle bin in the folder area?
The recycle bin of the operating system.
Okay.
So, and that's what send to trash is going to do. So instead of you using remove and remove tree, which is going to irreversibly delete everything, you can use the send to trash module. So you'll need to pip install this one. It's not a built-in module. Once you have it installed, you can import send to trash. You use it very similarly. So if we have a bacon file, we open it, we add text to it like this, we close it, and then we can send that to the trash. In order to send it to the trash, we just say import send to trash at the top, send to trash dot send to trash, and then pass it the file name we want to delete. At that point, it'll send it to whatever operating system's recycle bin. So Windows, Linux, whatever it is, it's going to send it there. All right, this next section is going to talk about walking a directory tree. Again, I'm doing these at a high level just so you're familiar with them. Most of you don't need this for your midterm project, but you should at least be exposed to it so that you can use it in the future. So when you go to walk a tree, if you guys are familiar with using like File Explorer, for example, on Windows, you're able to go see the directory tree, all the files that are underneath of it, see what's out there. If you are in a Linux operating system, you use the ls command, and that will list out all the files and folders that are in your current working directory. In Python, we do something similar using the os module and the walk function. So in this case, we can say from or for folder name, subfolders, and file names in os walk. What os walk does is it returns a tuple for every single time it goes and iterates through. We are using the multiple assignment trick here to give it a name that's relevant to us. So what this will do is it's going to loop through the entire OS walk of this folder called C:delicious. And then we're going to print out what the current folder name is. For every subfolder that we find, we're going to go inside and print this is a subfolder of the original folder and then tie that together. For every file name we find, we're going to say this is the file that's inside that folder in that file name. So OS walk is handy in that regard. It will pass you back 3 different things. Again, the string of the current folder's name, a list of all the strings of the folders that are in the current folder, and a list of strings of the files that are in that current folder. And so this can be beneficial to have output something like this. So it will go find this given folder. It will tell you what the subfolders of that are. It will find the files that are inside any of those subfolders and print that information out. We can also use a zip module. This zip module allows you to create your own zip files, which is handy if you're having something being backed up or you're writing a small Python program to back up some zip files and then send them off. In order to read a zip file, we have to import zip file module. We use that OS module as well. We're going to go ahead and use pathlib so that we don't have to worry about what operating system we're on. We're going to say p = path.home, get our home directory. Then we're going to create a zip file, and we're going to call that example zip equals zip file.zip file. Notice that this is capitalized when you use it, the Z and the F. And then you pass it the path that we want to create. Once we have that in there, we can use a name list function in order to read out into a list of all the files and folders that are inside that zip file. So this is us reading a current zip file. With spam info, we can use something like example zip.getInfo, pass it a given file that's inside of there. We can get things like that file size, the compression size. We can get all that information to print that kind of stuff out. So with Python, you can use and manipulate zip files. This here is an example of reading one, reading the contents, and reading the information about those contents. If you want to extract files from that zip file, it's the same way. You go ahead and open up that file. You use the extract all function, and then you can go ahead and close that zip file, and that will extract everything into that same folder that you're currently in. If you want it to go to a specific place, or you only want to pull out one file out of that, you can use just the extract function as opposed to extract all. You can tell it the one file you want to pull out or where you want to send it to. When it comes to creating and adding to zip files, it's very similar to when we use our write mode, when we use our open. So in this case, we're going to pass a W if we want to write. We would use an A if we want to append. So in this case, we're going to use a W in order to write a new zip file. When you write a new zip file in this write function, you tell it the file that you want to send to that zip file, and then you have to tell it what compression type you want. There's a lot of different compression types out there. This would be the most common default one, but if you guys are working with 7-zip or something more advanced, you would use a different module. All right. Does anybody have any questions over reading and working with those files? Again, I'm kind of just giving you a high level on those because it's not going to necessarily matter for the homework assignment, but you guys should know how to work and operate with files. That's one of the goals of this class. Okay. If you need practice on these, again, work with this backup project here. This is going to be a great way for you to understand how to read and write files as well as zip files as you go through. Some of you needed to know how to use zip files. I've had homework assignment or midterm projects where their goal was to write some software for their company that would back up a certain amount of files and send it someplace. So, or deleting certain files that are greater than a file size or something like that. Which gets you started on this homework assignment. So if we take a look at the homework assignment, let's get this fired up here. All right, so the idea is that you go to this URL, which we're going to do here in a new tab. This is a text file. You want to download the text file. So if you go to File and you go to Save, which you should have in here. Actually, if you just right click on it, you can do a Save As, and that will get you your text file. You need to put this into the folder that you're going to be working with on your text there. So I'm just going to put this in my downloads folder for now. It's fine. Okay, and you want that whole text file that's in there, and it's a pretty sizable text file. So if we actually open it up and take a look at it, we'll see that it is this entire long paragraph here, or this long section. All right, so about 953 lines that we're going to be sorting through and replacing some things about Sherlock Holmes. Okay, so once you have that downloaded, then what you need to do is create a script that's going to use and manipulate that particular file. We need to make sure that when we save this file, we save it as story.txt. So story.txt. Don't save it as the original file name that's here, which is this ingr.txt. So when you guys submit your homework assignment, you will not submit the text file. You will just submit your Python script. I have the text file. I'm going to use your script against that text file. Your script needs to do a couple different things here. So we're going to copy this in here and get you started on the first couple ones. All right, initial comments. I think you guys can figure that one out at this point. We want to be able to read the story.txt and store the lines as a variable called story. So I'm giving you the name of the variable that you need to use. So we want story equals, and then that's how we're going to open our file. So it would be something like open, and then we're going to pass in whatever our file name is. I ask that you specifically use relative paths and assume that story.txt is in the same folder as your script, which means you should just have story.txt here. You should not have an absolute path. we are just reading this file, so we can either use the R if we want, or we can just do this here. R is by default. And then when we open that up, we want to do something with that inside of there. We ask that you actually store those read lines, right? So in this case, we could say something like story file equals this, and then we're going to say story equals read lines. Story file dot read lines. Just like that. That will allow us to come out here, and for now, we're just going to print story, which is going to be massive in the output. That's what I want you to see. So if we read this, we're going to save our file. I need to save it in the same location as I did my other files. So we're going to say this is Jason Zeller assignment 4.py. And let's see here. All right. Missing a line here, and it's escaped me what I'm missing. So give me a second here. Okay. There we go. So when I first run this and we look at this squeeze.txt, if I double click that, I can actually see that I get all the lines of that was included in there. Notice that it's going to be in a list because we asked it to use read lines. Okay. So right now, all this program is doing is opening that big text file. It's reading every single line and adding it to a list. Now you'll notice my idle gets really unresponsive when I try to look at this amount of text. So you don't want to print this story unless you just want to test to make sure that you have things set up. Make sure that in your script, you never print out the whole output, because otherwise your idle is going to chunk. That's why if you run it again here, it always says squeezed and then gives you the output. That is because, I removed it here. So if I do print story, you will see this little yellow here that says squeeze text. This means that there's 674 lines of output. Are you sure you want to see it? If you double click it, it will print it, but it will sometimes make your idle look like it's not responsive. So you just have to kind of wait till it loads everything up. Okay, so that's the first part where all we're supposed to do is read it in. We're using a relative path here, which means I don't need path lib. I don't need anything else for this particular instance. We do need to put our assignment deal at the top. So let's just do that for posterity. Come in here, grab your guys' assignment. This is homework 4. Make sure you put your name in here. Okay. So there's the first 3 points. This next one is saying, write a regular expression that will find all the occurrences of the phrase Sherlock Holmes. Okay. So now we have to go back to our regular expression chapter. So if we come back here to regular expressions and we go back to our section here, this will help you out. So scroll back down. And what we want to do is find specific patterns of text. So if you remember how to do this, we have to import RE. And remember, you always do your imports at the top. So we're going to import RE. And I'm going to get rid of this print here because we don't want to be printing that out. I will say read file to lines. There we go. So the story file, that file name can be whatever you want. This part here where I ask you to read the lines, you're specifically supposed to use the variable story. This is the stuff that I count and take points off of. So if I tell you here in this to make sure you use this, make sure you use that. Otherwise, that's where you'll lose points. So our next part here is to write this regular expression. All right, so we imported RE and we need to create our regex object. So we're going to call it Sherlock equals re.compile. And we could specifically pass in a raw string of Sherlock Holmes. Something like this. All right, this is what we're supposed to be searching. Sherlock Holmes. Make sure we got the spelling the exact same. You found it. Okay. So that right there is going to be one of your next points, is just writing that simple regular expression. Now we're going to use the substitution method in order to replace all the occurrences of the Sherlock Holmes with your name, storing the count of all of those occurrences as a variable called found count. So I'll get you started on this one. All right, so if we go back to our text, if you guys remember, we found a way to replace things. Does anybody remember what that function's called? It's the substitute string, right? So substitute will allow us to go out, we give it a particular string that we want to replace with, and then we pass it the line that we want to do that in. So we need to go through each line that is up here in our story. So for line in story, then we do Sherlock dot sub, and then we substitute in whatever we want. In this case, I'm supposed to say my name. And then we pass it the string that we wanted to search through. We are searching through our line. Remember, we're going through every line in that loop from up above. And we pass that down, and it would go ahead and go through every single line in that story. If it finds Sherlock Holmes, it replaces it with Jason Zeller at this point. Now, the caveat to that is if we go back and look at what you were supposed to do, you need to store the count of every occurrence that you actually replaced it in. In other words, I want to know the total number of Sherlock Holmes that are actually in that you replaced everything on. There's two ways of going about this. We could do back up here, we had a find all, where we could find all the occurrences of Sherlock, right? That would pass them into a list. Then we could do a length on the list to find out the total number of occurrences. The other option is, instead of substitute here, there's another one called replace. Give me a second here. It's not replace, it's a different sub. The goal was that you guys would have to go look this one up. So there's two ways of doing this homework assignment. You can either do the sub and then do find all and find all the occurrences first. So you'd want to do that before you do your substitution. So say we wanted to do the find all method in that way of going through it. So we need to do a search, and then we need to find all the way through there. So if you guys remember how to do this, we have Mo equals, and then whatever our search is. So this will be our Sherlock dot search. And we're going to search through the line since we're going through for each line. And then we would have to say if mo, right? Dot group. And that would return us the group of all the ones that we found in that particular line. So if Sherlock Holmes is in that line multiple times, we would have to do a count or a length on that in order to get that back. In this case, we would want groups, right? So we could get a list and we can count it, which means that you need a running tally up here, which we asked you to call it specifically. Come on, mouse. Found count. So we need to create a variable over here that is found count equals 0. And then for every one of these Sherlock Holmes that you find, you want to increase this count. Remember that that would just look something like found count plus equals 1, right? And that will just add every occurrence to there and find it. All right, that's as far as I'm going to go there. On this next one here, you're going to do the same exact thing, only you're going to find the occurrence of the word the. The is tricky, right? So when you have to build out the regular expression for the, you can't just use it like we did up here in Sherlock Holmes. The reason is because it's going to find the in the word there or where or any of those other ones that have a THE in it, right? You want specifically only the word the, which means you're going to have a little bit longer regular expression here to just find the words of the. So what I would recommend you do is if you come out to your file that we downloaded, which is our story, right? And we see there's a the in this first paragraph. If you take out this whole first paragraph and copy it, and if you remember in our regular expression section, I gave you this Regex 101. Put that down here in your test area, which looks like it actually pulled a bunch of extra characters in there. Should still find it. If we put the word the up here and we make sure we are on Python, there we go. You'll notice that we find the word the for every one of these, but you're also noticing that we find the word the in there. We also find it over here in Hatherley's, etc. We need to just specifically find the word the. So you'll need to work with these options down below here to just find the occurrence of the word the. And I'm not going to tell you which ones these are, but you can find those down here at the bottom, as well as if you reference what we talked about and automate the boring stuff, you should be able to specifically match what you're wanting. So that's the one that tricks everybody on that homework assignment, is making sure that you don't do it like you did with Sherlock Holmes, that you actually find the exact way of finding just the word the. And if you use this Regex 101 and you build it out up here at the top, then you can test it and make sure that it only finds it by just stealing out that first paragraph. Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, for the rest of that homework assignment, pull this back up here. You'll do the same thing. You're going to keep a total count of the occurrences of the word the. That is going to be called the count. So you have found count and the count. At this point, nothing's being printed out to the user. Now, these last few points here is that you're going to print to the user the original file name, or I'm sorry, you're going to print out the original name, which is Sherlock Holmes, your replacement name, your name, and the total number of occurrences that you use to print that out. I ask that you use that doing a formatted literal string. What does that mean? If you remember on a print string, that means using an F statement in front of it. So when you have your text in here, you could say something like the original name was, and then we pass this in here as Sherlock Holmes. And the new name was Jason Zeller. And the total occurrences was, And then you need to use that variable name back above. So in this case, it would be found count, right? And you remember you use that in squiggly brackets inside your string. And then you close it like that. You do not have to pass in the variable. You're passing in the variable name right inside of here, but you have to have that F in front. So for these two print statements, you should have something very similar to this. Obviously spell original and all that stuff correct. Does anybody have any questions with that? If you just use a print plus and do string concatenation, you won't get the points. I'm looking you for specifically utilizing these F statements in here. And the reason is in your midterm project, final project, you should be using F statements at this point and not trying to concatenate everything together. This is way easier inside of here. Normally, what you guys would know up to this point is we would have this, right? You would say plus found count, and you could print it, which is fine if that's at the very end. But then in order to get your grammar and all that stuff, you're also going to have like a period in here or something like that for them to see it. Instead of doing all this, if I just use an F statement, I can do found count. It dumps it in for me there, and I can put my period in, format my string exactly the way I want it to print out to the user. If it's actually somewhere up here in the middle, I could print that out as well, just using that variable inside of here. The other best thing about this is you don't have to convert integers to strings and do all that. F statements does that for you. So before, since this was a number, in order to do what we just did before with this, found count would have been something like this, right? But it's an integer, so we would have had to have converted it to a string before we could actually print it out. If you use F statements, you don't have to do that. You can just do exactly this on the screen, and that's it. So that's the reason I want you guys to start using F statements in that case. So you do that for what the name you replaced. You do that with a string that tells me the total number of occurrences of the word the. And then at the end, you're going to save out the story to a new line, right? So if you remember, in this original story, we were replacing all of those lines. Remember that when we open story, it's just reading it here. We now have modified story. We need to write all of those lines out to a new file. When you write them out to a new file, make sure you call that new file new story. If you call it story.txt and overwrite my text file, I count off extra, because then I have to go re-download the text file to do the next student's assignment. So call it new story.txt. You should have a little option down here in order to review and save that out. Then when I open up your text file like this here, instead of seeing the word Sherlock Holmes inside of here, I should be able to see your name specifically in there. Now, it's not going to find like this Holmes here. It's only supposed to find the whole name Sherlock Holmes. Anybody have any questions? So when I grade your assignment, I'm going to make sure you read it just like this. I'm going to make sure that you're using read lines, and I'm going to make sure that you're using a relative path. On the Sherlock Holmes, I'm going to double check your regular expression, make sure it's accurate. Also for the word the. When you do your substitution method, I need to know exactly how many times you replaced it, making sure that you replaced everything. When I grade your print statements, I'm making sure you're using F statements, and then they're formatted in the way that I asked you to format them. And then the last point, that you're saving out the new file to a new text file. Anybody have any questions on the homework assignment? Okay. If you do get homework or do get questions, rather, let me know. Email me, that kind of thing. I'll try to help.